Georgie and Mandy's first marriage reprised Lance Barber's George Sr., but the patriarch had a bittersweet reunion with his son that only highlights the family's unresolved grief following his death. The spin-off set up by the Young Sheldon finale mostly focuses on the McAllister family, matriarch Audrey, Rachel Bay Jones, husband Jim, Will Sasso, oddball Connor, Dougie Baldwin, and George's wife, Mandy, Emily Osmond. While main characters from Young Sheldon have had guest roles, the cast of Georgie and Mandy's first marriage puts a new family under the microscope. Yet, for all its comedic relief, Georgie and Mandy's first marriage has serious undertones. Starting from Georgie and Mandy's first marriage episode 2, the spin-off began to explore George's troubles following the death of George Sr. in Young Sheldon season 7. While the comedy initially had Georgie frequently visiting his father's grave, the cemetery has been abandoned for the real deal. To further explore George's issues taking up the mantle as a father, Georgie and Mandy's first marriage brought back Lance Barber to give his fictional son a heart-to-heart. Georgie reconnects with his father in a tonally distinct fever dream in First Marriage, episode 12. For a moment, the sitcom stops being a sitcom. George and Georgie in First Marriage episode 12. Lance Barber's emotional return in Georgie and Mandy's first marriage came with a markedly different tone during George's fever dream. After falling asleep with a fever of 102, Georgie dreams he's back in his childhood home with his father making pancakes. The camera is higher quality, the laugh track is gone, and even the colors in the scene are more muted and natural. The dream sequence doesn't play out exactly like a Young Sheldon episode, but it's distinct from the spin-off's classic sitcom structure. The visual differences not only jar the viewer, but they give a unique insight into George's mind. Taking such a drastically different approach to the dream sequences made Barber's return feel more grounded. Rather than use Barber's image in a more outlandish, comedic way to speak through George's dream, the spin-off packs an emotional punch by opting for a more minimalist approach. Instead of dreaming they're on the moon or in the midst of some grand adventure, George Sr. is just standing in the kitchen and waiting for Georgie. The sad simplicity reflects how Georgie is still grieving his father, to the point where all he wants, even in his imagination, is one more morning with him. George Sr.'s disappointment is a manifestation of George's anxiety. Having to bear so much responsibility is taking a toll on him. Montana Jordan as Georgie Cooper in Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage episode 6. Since George Sr. is dead, everything he says or does in the dream is indicative of George's psyche. The fact that Georgie is dreaming that his father is disappointed in him simply for taking care of himself is reminiscent of Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage episode 2, when a doctor tells Georgie he has anxiety. Although Georgie writes it off as the titular New York nonsense, it's clear that juggling all of his responsibilities and his emotions is too much for him. Not even the image of his father can convince Georgie that he deserves to take a break, though the couple are meant to be in love. The age gap in Georgie and Mandy's first marriage only further illustrates the depth of George's anxiety. While mourning a father, trying to keep a grieving mother afloat, caring for an infant, worrying about a sister, and trying to fit in with in-laws would be tough on anybody, it's easy to forget that Georgie is only 19 in the spin-off. In the real world, Georgie would barely be able to vote and wouldn't be able to drink yet, but he's dealing with enough stressors to put him at risk for grand cardiac events. George has never gotten the time to grieve George's death. Fear and pride are preventing his healing. Montana Jordan as Georgie at George's grave in Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage. For a sitcom, Georgie and Mandy's first marriage has given Georgie complex grief to handle, if he can only let himself confront his pain. George's complicated feelings about George Sr. come to light in Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage episode 12 more clearly than ever, showing that his greatest fear is following in his father's footsteps. Now that he has a child, Georgie is terrified at the prospect of leaving CC fatherless, yet at the same time, he won't give himself any room to breathe. Trying to emulate George Sr.'s stubbornness will only hurt Georgie in the long run. Even when Jim tries to gently disagree with Georgie that his memory of his father proves he should persevere above all else, it's only when Connor reminds him how young he was that Georgie faces the ugly truth: he doesn't want to die like his father did. George's surviving family isn't better off, with the Cooper family basically dictated by their unresolved grief. Missy's, Reagan Revord, teenage rebellion is exacerbated by her emotions around missing her father, while Zoe Perry's Mary is the true villain of Georgie and Mandy's first marriage due to the feelings she refuses to work through. Can Barber's George return in future First Marriage episodes? Possible but not guaranteed. While Lance Barber's return to Georgie and Mandy's first marriage was a necessary and profound change of pace, any future appearances will be scarce by necessity. Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage is still establishing itself as both a standalone title and a spin-off, and, though the end result is implied by the franchise's original series, how the characters get to their final destination is up to the second prequel. Utilizing Barber too much would take away from the sitcom and make Georgie and Mandy's first marriage feel like nothing more than an extended eulogy for the Cooper family patriarch. Still, there are narrative conceits that would explain George Sr.'s return in Georgie and Mandy's first marriage if the comedy wants to call Barber back for special occasions. Though he originally appears in a fever dream, George Sr. could trickle into George's normal dreams or even something more conscious, like his inner monologue. Similarly, George Sr. as a character could be used as a plot device for Missy and Mary's development, though it's unclear how Barber could be on screen for any of their scenes without drawing all the focus. Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage Season 2 could come up with a more creative option, but the question remains of whether it should. Lance Barber returning to help set up George's arc was a meaningful use of his character, but it was only that impactful because it feels like a once-in-a-lifetime event, and it should be. Though episode 12 was amazing, Georgie and Mandy's first marriage needs to avoid overusing George Sr. or else it runs the risk of ruining his send-off.